speakers here are not that great. That was a beautiful song, and I told Pastor, our church a few years ago looked into a new sound system, and for a full-size church, they were talking about $15,000, $20,000 for speakers, and I just thought that was crazy. And we had a group come in and sing for us. It was a husband and wife, and they had a Bose single-stack speaker with a subwoofer, and it blew us away how good that was. And so I started to look into them, and they were about $1,700 US. It folds up into a little bag. You carry it. It's lightweight. It's got the subwoofer that gives a nice bass sound, and I would strongly encourage you to do that because you've got great music, and it's sad that sometimes it's lost in those speakers. And so I don't know if you can do that or not. If not, maybe I'll buy one for Christmas. Probably not, but anyways.
Preach it.
Somebody take that drunk man out, please. Miss Stalker gave me this tonight. She's a little girl. She's knelt down at the bed with her little dolls, and it says this: Jesus, please come quickly. This world has lost its mind. There's some truth to that, isn't there? So that's our children. You think about this. What's this world going to be for our children and our grandchildren? Whoo! We better be praying. We better be praying for our kids and grandkids, for our kids that are raising our grandkids. Wow, it's an incredible day. I don't want to discourage our young people either, though. There are some great opportunities. You have some wonderful young people in your church. They're not here tonight, but you have some. I'm just kidding. They're here tonight. But you have some young people here tonight that I think can do some great things for the Lord. That could have some great ambitions. Flame that. And fan that flame, I should say, and encourage them. Though the world looks bad to us, they've not known anything different. This is their world. And if you'll think of this, I preached a message years ago at our church. This is the good old days for these kids. Our good old days are gone. We're never going to recreate that world. We're never going to have that world again. But we can provide for them some great memories of this day. And meetings like this do that. You've been here for the last 3 or 4 days. Some of you, thank you for that. God bless you. You have some great endurance, and that's not common today. And I thank you for that, and I praise the Lord for it. We've had a great time. And I want to conclude tonight with this message in John chapter 13, the improbable imposter. The improbable imposter. Would you go to John chapter 13? While you're doing that, I'll explain that an imposter is one who practices deception under an assumed character, an identity, and name. An imposter adapts to and acts so convincingly like someone else that they even at times begin believing it themselves. I want to show you tonight 2 seemingly imposters. One you'll probably know very well, and the other may be quite a shock. The first we find in our text of John chapter 13 and verses 21 to 30. Let's read there together. When Jesus had thus said, he was troubled in spirit and testified and said, Verily, verily, I say unto you that one of you shall betray me. Then the disciples looked one on another, doubting of whom he spake. Now, there was one leaning on Jesus' bosom, one of his disciples whom Jesus loved. Simon Peter therefore beckoned to him that he should ask who it should be of whom he spake. He then, lying on Jesus' breast, saith unto him, Lord, who is it? And Jesus answered, He it is to whom I shall give a sop when I have dipped it. And when he had dipped the sop, he gave it to Judas Iscariot, the son of Simon. Very, very careful to identify clearly who it is, because the name Judas was common in the time of Jesus, not like now. In Mark chapter 14 and verse 20, it says, To whom I will give sop in the dish. That's important. I'll show you that in a minute. In verse 27, it says, And after the sop, Satan entered into him. Then said Jesus unto him, That thou doest, do quickly. Now, no man at the table knew for what intent he spake this unto him. For some of them thought, because Judas had the bag, that Jesus had said unto him, Buy those things which we have need of against the feast, or that he should give something to the poor, which was part of the Passover observance. In verse 30, he then, having received the sop, went immediately out, and it was night. I've never known anyone named Judas. Have you? I've never known anyone. Any country I've ever been in? Anybody I've ever known? I've never known someone in the saved world or even amongst the lost to name their child Judas. Why? Because the name is synonymous with being a treacherous imposter. An imposter. Yet to those around him, closest to him, they thought him an improbable imposter. The disciples could not grasp that Judas was the one that was going to betray Jesus Christ and give him into the hands of the guards of Caiaphas that he might be later crucified by the Roman soldiers. They didn't get it. Now, we see it because we know the story. We're looking back in 2020. But these men did not get it. I want to show you why that was so. I want to show you why Judas was an improbable imposter to them, but a very clear imposter to us. Number one, he was seemingly very close to Christ. Very close. Now, I want to demonstrate something for you and show you this. Having gone to Israel, I've learned a great deal. I've mentioned that many times because it's had such an impact on my life. I will take 2 trips in February, Lord willing. This will be trip 12 and 13. So I've been to Israel a number of times. I've had some different guides in Israel, and I had one that was my guide for 4 or 5 trips. His name was Salah Siam. He was Arab. And Salah knew the Bible better than most Christians. He had studied it his whole life. He'd been guiding his whole life. His father was a guide. He was the postmaster general, and he has led many independent Baptist churches through the Holy Land. And so we were happy to have him, and he did a great job. He had a great sense of humor. He and I became very close friends, and I really thought I was going to lead him to Christ, but I never had the opportunity. But he taught me something. So in Israel, like most countries, it's not what you know, it's who you know, right? And if you have a business, you're going to try and get people to come to your business, and you're going to try to build that business, and you're going to reward those who take advantage of your business. So when we went out to eat, we always went to restaurants that Salah picked us to eat at. We didn't say, well, let's stop at this one. He'd say, I got a restaurant. We're going to go to a restaurant. And we go to the restaurant. We go to almost every time we went to the same restaurants. And so I figured out very quickly that these guys are giving something to Salah so that he'll come to their restaurant. They're giving him a percentage of what they make or whatever. But one of the things that they all did was they treated him to a very special meal. So when we went in the restaurant, when I first started in the first few years of going, I would eat with our group, and I love doing that. I try to sit with everybody that goes on the trip. It's 10 days, and so I have an opportunity through the trip to sit with everybody that goes and get to know them and laugh with them a little bit, encourage them. But one day, Salah said, hey, today I want you to eat with me. I said, okay, that'd be great. And he said, I'm going to give you something special. And so we went to Jericho, and we were outside the site of the excavated walls of Jericho. There's some remains there. And so we went into this restaurant, and they began to serve us. And we sat at a table. There was myself and Brother Brett Pennell and Salah. And I learned this very quickly. They had the table. Brother Brett sat on one side. I sat on the other side. And they began to bring out dishes of hummus. If you like hummus, no better hummus in the world than in Israel. It's tremendous. It's just incredible. They brought out olives. They brought out olive oil. They brought out cucumbers. They brought out tomatoes. And you would dip in the oils and then take the vegetables. And they had other different spices that you could dip in. Incredible. They brought out the flatbread right out of the oven. It was still warm. Tremendous. And they would sit it in front of Salah, and then he would offer to us to take of that. He'd take a piece of bread and he'd tear it off and say, this is for you and this is for you. And then he'd say, here, take some of this and take some of this. And so we would do that. And as we were eating, he told me that the custom in the Arab world and in the Jewish world too was that the father sat at the table and then the children would sit beside the father. The oldest son would sit at the right hand of the father. We've seen that in the Bible, haven't we? We know that Jesus sits at the right hand of the father. On the left side would be the next oldest child, usually if it's a son, sit there or daughter, and then it would fan down to the youngest child. Now, Salah said we had 11 in our family, and I was the 11th child. He said when the food finally got down to me, there was never anything left. He said I had to scrape all the bowls to get whatever. But he told me this. He said in the house, my mother would bring the food and set it in front of my father, and my 2 oldest brothers would eat with my father. And he said this. He said, because in our custom, it is offensive to reach across someone. So the bowls would sit here, and he would share with those on his left and right. Great custom. And so we ate that way that day, and others sat at the table, and the next group of people would eat from those bowls that were in front of them. So I want to demonstrate to you now what Jesus was doing in that Passover. So Pastor, if you come and help me out, and I'll get you, Brother George, to come. Troy, why don't you come? And come and help me, would you, Dave? And Anders, would you come? So, Pastor, I want you to stand right here in the middle. Anders, I'm going to get you to stand right here. I'll get you, George, to stand over here. And I'll get you over here, Brother Dave. And Troy, you're going to come down over here. So here we are. We're sitting at the table of the Last Supper. Now, in the custom of Jesus' day, they would probably be on the floor reclining. It would be more the Chinese where you sit with crossed legs at the table. They would recline. They would have maybe some pillows there to lean back on. We don't know if they would use a round table or a longer table. We're not sure. It could have been either. It doesn't really matter. But they would sit in the style. So Jesus, and Pastor will represent Jesus tonight. I really had to stretch it to get a character. But we'll see him as Jesus tonight. And then we know that to his right was the beloved, was the one that wrote the account that we're talking about. He never identifies himself, but we know from his writing, and of course by the name of the book, we know that that was who? John the Beloved. So you're John the Beloved tonight, and you love Jesus. And so you love him so much that you would put your head on his chest, on his breast. That's right. Put your arm around John. You love him. That's right. That's right. Kind of like a father, all right? Kind of like a father to you, all right? And so they didn't love each other that much. And so that's what it was. Now, the idea is not that he had his hand necessarily on his breast. The idea was that they were that close, and when he would talk, he would be in that, that facsimile of that area. So we have John, and then in the reading, because he speaks, we think of Peter. And we have Peter who communicates as well. Now, in the story, Jesus is telling the disciples, whoever I give the sop to, whoever I dip this bread and into the hummus or whatever it was and give it to, that's who's going to betray me. Very clear. You got that? Anybody struggle with that? Makes sense to me. And then Jesus does it. But the disciples don't get that it's Judas, right? So here's what I've always envisioned, and this is what I thought. So I think, well, this is John, and this must be Peter. But that doesn't make sense. Doesn't make sense. Because Peter says he beckons to John. Ask him who it is, right? Now, does it make sense for Peter to say, hey, John, ask him who it is? I mean, Jesus is right here. Even if he sneaks around back, goes, hey, John, ask him who it was. He's right here. Doesn't make sense. Now, we know this. If that's not Peter, then this must be Peter. Because Peter's right next to John, says, ask him who it was. That makes sense, right? So then who's this? Well, what a perfect representation we have here. This is Judas. And how do we know it's Judas? Because Jesus said, to whomever I give the sop, it's impolite to reach across. It's impolite to reach across. So he was said, whoever I give this to, Jesus is the master. Who sits at the right hand? The beloved son, John. Everybody knows, it's one of Jesus' favorites. He's always involved in the inner circle for some reason. John had Jesus' heart. And who sat at the left? The next of importance, the next that he loved? Judas. Now that doesn't make sense to us. But it made sense to them because he had the money. He was well trusted. See, in Israel, they have what they call kibbutz. And a kibbutz is a farm, and it's a community of farmers. And what they do is they put all their money together. They buy all the equipment they need. They buy the seed that they need, and then they farm together. And everybody has a responsibility. They eat together. They live in a communal housing. They do everything together, and then they get paid according to what they need. And so it's the same kind of system. It's almost a communist type system, a good communist type system, in that all the disciples put their money together and Judas holds on to it. Very trusted position. We don't give our money to just anybody, do we? So they trusted Judas. And why did they trust him? Because he appeared to be a good man. He's at the left hand of the Father. He's a well-trusted man by Jesus and a confidant. He's in that inner circle of people. And he dips it. And he gives it to Judas. And Judas takes it and he leaves the table. Jesus said, to whomever I give this sop, that is who will betray me. He dips it in the oil or the hummus or whatever it was. He gives it to him and he leaves. And the disciples say, who is it? Who is it? Who can it be? They don't get it. Obvious, whoever I give it to, gives it to him, he leaves, and they say this, Oh, he must be going to get more food for the Passover. Or maybe he's going to give money to the poor. I mean, Jesus makes it obvious. Why didn't they get it? I'll tell you why. Because he's an imposter. He's an improbable imposter. There's no way it could be Judas. He's one of the trusted. He's in the inner circle. He's sitting next to Jesus. Improbable imposter. Gentlemen, you can be seated. Thank you so much. He was seemingly very close to Jesus. In Mark chapter 14 and verse 20, it says, "It is one of the 12 that dippeth with me in the dish." That makes it even clearer. That's just what I told you about our guide. In that circle of three, there's Judas. Seemingly very close, but yet so very far away. So close was the seeming relationship that no one even picked up on the open and obvious identification sign of passing the sop that Jesus gave. It can't be Judas. He's leaving to pay for something else. But in reality, he goes to sell out Christ while selling himself out to the devil. Sometimes improbable people we think are with Christ, who are saved, are imposters. I want you to look at the people in your row tonight. Look at the people in the row, people that you're in tonight. Look down that row. You're all are you all sisters? Your sisters? Sister-in-laws. Yes, not sisters. Sisters-in-law, right. You got nice sister-in-laws, though, don't you? You love them very much, don't you? You're going to buy them a nice gift at Christmas, aren't you? No. He doesn't love them that much. How old are you? 23. 21. 20. All right, so right in range there. So you've known each other a long time. You know each other very well. Which one of the three is the mean one? Are you looking at each other or the middle? I think we're looking here. Which one's the little brat? They know each other very well. Let me ask you, is your sister saved?
Yeah.
Are you sure?
She says so.
She says so. What about this sister? Is she saved?
I hope so.
Do you know for sure? 100%. No. No. She is saved? Or you're not sure? She knows. She knows. And God knows. That's it that really knows. Because we can put on a pretty good show sometimes, can't we? Oh man, we can play our violins and we can come to church and be happy and look good. And I'm not doubting your salvation. I believe you're saved. But there are people that do put on a great show sometimes. You've had people come to this church and talk about how much they love Jesus and how much they want to serve him, and they end up leaving the church and going into a life of sin, and you think, you know what? They were never saved. We've had people come to our church, and they'll come and kneel and make a profession and get up and seem to change, but very quickly you soon find out that they are just an imposter. There may be somebody here tonight who's an imposter. You're not saved, and you know it. Judas knew who he was. He knew what he was doing. He knew what was going to be the outcome, and he followed through with it. Imposter. Why did he do that? Why did he follow Jesus? Why did he get so close to Jesus? I believe this. I believe Judas thought, as many thought, that Jesus was going to be an earthly king, that he was going to reign on the throne of Israel. He was going to kick Rome out. He was going to take over the country. He was going to be the king, and he would be rich. And Judas would be his trusted confidant that would hold the bag. And we'll learn about that in a little bit. So maybe tonight in this room, there are some people who look like Christians. They say they're Christians. They sing the hymns. They have a Bible. They talk about the Lord, but in their heart of hearts, they may not be saved. Maybe someone in your family tonight. Someone that you know that says, I'm a Christian, but there may be some doubt. Are they an imposter? The only two people who really know are you and the Lord. Are you an improbable imposter tonight? Maybe if I pointed someone out in this room tonight, say, Brother Dave, you say, oh, there's no way. That guy loves the Lord. He serves the Lord. He treats his wife good when he's not beating her. I mean, he's really a good guy. Loves his mother-in-law, helps care for her, speaks highly of her. He's at church. He's a deacon. He helps with other things. It could never be him. But I've known deacons that were imposters. And I've known Sunday school teachers that were imposters. I've known preachers that were imposters. Well, Then we see this improbable imposter that he was seemingly very concerned for the cause. Would you go to John chapter 12 with me? John chapter 12. Let's look at verse 3 to 7. Now this takes place before the Passover. So this passage to me should have been a red flag to the disciples. They should have right now realized, hey, something's not right here. Something's not jiving. So when we go into the Passover, they would have said, oh, it's got to be Judas because look what he did back here just a few days or weeks before. It says in verse 3, Then took Mary a pound of ointment of spikenard, very costly, and anointed the feet of Jesus, and wiped his feet with her hair, and the house was filled with the odor of ointment. Then saith one of his disciples, look how closely he identifies him, Judas Iscariot, Simon's son, which should betray him. Why was not this ointment sold for 300 pence and given to the poor? I mean, that sounds good, doesn't it? Man, why don't we take this special gift and be able to do more for somebody who has less? This he said, now watch, not that he cared for the poor, but because he was a what? Thief. And he had the bag and bare what was put therein. Then said Jesus, let her alone. Against the day of my burying has she kept this. Wow, what a love story. This woman, Mary Magdalene, loved Jesus and wanted to do something for him. Leslie, do you love your husband? Yes? She's a little hesitant there. Little hesitant. You love your husband. And Troy, you love your wife very much. And you do anything for her. And you do anything for your husband because you love him. You've got a great relationship. Now, you cook him good meals daily. You help clean his clothes and keep the house clean, right? And you love your husband a great deal. How many times have you ever washed Troy's feet with your hair? Never. I don't blame you. I've seen them things. I wouldn't touch them either. Whew, nasty. Any ladies here ever wash your husband's feet? Ladies, come on. Did you really? You washed your husband's feet? Wow, you did that. Did you wash his feet with your hair? No, across the line with a rag and some soap. Yes, but not with your hair. This woman is so thankful to Jesus that she does something that most women would never think to do. In a culture where they wore sandals all the time, in the dry desert, their feet would be dry and cracked and calloused and tough and all of those things. And she takes this expensive ointment that she had saved, she breaks it open, and she pours it on the feet of Jesus and washes his feet with her hair. And Judas says, shouldn't we be selling this and giving it to the poor? Who would say that? When a lady comes in and wants to show her love and appreciation to the Savior of what he's done, saving her soul and casting demons out of her life. Very calloused. And there should have been some red flags. But there weren't. Why? Because he was a great imposter. I think he might have said, oh, this is incredible, but imagine what we could have done for the poor if we'd taken that and sold it. I don't think he said it real mean. I don't think he said it real calloused. I think he played a great role. And the disciples began to think, yeah, what if we had done that? But Jesus says, hey, you leave her alone. This is for me. This is for my burial. She's telling you something by what she's doing here. Judas says, I want to sell that and give it to the poor, but that's not what he really meant. What he was saying was, we should take that money and put it into the bag that I carry, and then when you guys aren't looking, I'll take the money out of that bag and put it in my own pocket, and I'll put it with the store that I've got. I also think this, think about this. Do you think that the disciples traveled for 3.5 years with Jesus without their families? I don't. My wife and I, we spent, the first year I started traveling in evangelism, I was gone about 270 days out of 365. That was almost a breaking point for us. She came sometimes with me, but I was away from home for that amount of time. And I said, I'll never do that again. That was too many days away from my wife. Can you imagine a man saying, hey, honey, I'll be back in 3.5 years and following Jesus. See ya. Take care of the kids. Bye. No way. I think they travel together. I think that makes sense. And I think Jesus played with the children at night, and I think that they sat around the campfire and telling jokes. I think Jesus was very human in his humanity and very godlike in his God deity. And so they would travel together, and so they'd say, ladies, what are you having for supper tonight? We're going to have roast lamb. Okay, what do we need? We need some vegetables. Okay, go get Judas and get some money and go to the market and get what we need. And they'd go, Judas, we need some money. He'd pay it out. They trusted him. And they didn't see it. And maybe they saw because they said at the Passover, oh, maybe he's going to give some money to the poor. Why? Because he said back in this account, I want to give some money to the poor. It's a great imposter. There are people who will come to this church who will talk about doing great things and seem very charitable and seem like they really want to help others, but in reality, they just want to help themselves. I'm sure if you're a church like any church, you've had some business people come, and boy, they come in, and man, they think this is great, and you're wonderful, and I want to get involved, and Pastor, you can count on me, and I'm a businessman, and I'll show you how to do things. In reality, what they're thinking is, I can make a contact here, and I can make a contact here, and I've got some resources over here, and I can sell to them. Sometimes that happens. Not always, but sometimes that happens. And you find out later, you think, wow, the only reason they came was because they wanted to get something from us rather than give something to the cause of Christ. That's this man. And so we get upset with those that come in and do that. But yet, this man is so good, they don't get upset at all. They just let him go. He said, I'll play the game. I'll put it on when I have to. But as soon as I get the chance, I will satisfy and gratify my longings and myself. And then finally, we see this. We see he was seemingly careful not to get caught. Would you go to Matthew chapter 26 with me? Back just a little bit. Matthew chapter 26, we're going to read verses 47 to 51. Matthew 26, 47 to 51. And while he yet spake, lo, Judas, one of the 12, came, with him a great multitude with swords and staves from the chief priests and elders of the people. Let me stop there for just a minute. When we go to Israel, we go to Caiaphas' house. Still there. They know historically, they found documents, they've got records. That was Caiaphas' house. We go to Caiaphas' house, and in Caiaphas' house, when you come on the main floor, you see a regular house, regular setting, but there's a large room, and in that room, there's a hole in the floor. And beneath that, there is a rounded hole beneath that in the area below. When you walk down the stairs to get down to that place, you find that there is a prison there. There are cells there. There's 3 or 4 cells. There is a whipping post there. There are 2 holes above the one cell where they would put the ropes, and they would take logs and drive it in there to hold the ropes up over their head, and they'd whip them there. And then you go down and you go into that circular area, and what that circular area was, it was a pit. And that pit was a holding area for the worst of thieves. It probably would have reeked of human waste. It would have been filled with lice, rats. It would have been disgusting. We go into that area, and it's now all clean, and it's all done up. But that's the place where Jesus would have been held for the trial. They would have lowered him with ropes under his arms, down in. They would have lowered the ropes again and hauled him up. We go to that spot, and when we do, we sing, "And Can It Be," the song that you sang tonight. It is one of the most moving, one of the most gut-wrenching places that we visit in Israel, one of my favorite places. One of our greatest services is in that place. And so from Caiaphas' house, we now read in verse 48, "Now he that betrayed him gave them a sign, saying, Whomsoever I shall kiss, that same is he. Behold him fast. And forthwith he came to Jesus and said, Hail, Master, and kissed him." Now let me stop there for a minute and show you this. In Romania, when 2 men greet, they do this. Come on. They probably clasp hands, right? Do you do hands? Yeah. And then they do this. Mwah, mwah, mwah. They kiss. Now, it's the only time I've ever kissed a man, and it's the last time I'm going to kiss a man. And it would never be on the lips. But that's what they do. That's the same custom in the Middle East and other parts of the world too. He said, when I kiss him, he came up, that's a normal greeting. That's what you do. When I kiss him, whoever I kiss, that's the one. All right? Let's go on and read on. It says this in verse 49, and forthwith he came to Jesus and said, Hail, Master, and kissed him. And Jesus said unto him, Friend, wherefore art thou come? Now don't be fooled by the word friend, because that means acquaintance. It's not a close-knit relationship. Then came they and laid hands on Jesus and took him. And behold, one of them, we read in the other accounts, we know who that is, it's Peter, which were with Jesus, stretched out his hand and drew his sword and struck a servant, Malchus, we know his name, of the high priest, and smote off his ear. Now, this great multitude comes. Judas says, now just to be safe, there's 11 guys there. There's some fishermen, a tax collector. There's a former zealot who was a professional killer, really. There's some tough guys there. We better take a multitude just in case that we get in trouble. There are 11, and one of them for sure is armed. Probably two. Probably the zealot, and probably we know Peter. And so he said, we better take some backup. Why would a religion need soldiers? This isn't the Romans. This is from Caiaphas, the high priest. Well, I would ask the same question of the Vatican. Why do they need soldiers at the Vatican? Why do they need an army at the Vatican? Same thing. We go on. Funny thing here is, Peter takes off the ear of the servant of the high priest. Judas comes in. Judas identifies Jesus. Judas steps back. The soldiers take Jesus into possession. And Peter takes out his sword, and he cuts off the ear of the servant of the high priest. Now, wouldn't it make sense, knowing what we know, if Judas would have taken the sword and run it through Judas? Wouldn't that make sense? Makes sense to me. He's just given Jesus into the hands of the soldiers of the high priest. They've been running from the high priest for the last little bit. They know that they're after Jesus. He's made them mad time after time after time. And he's telling them, hey, listen, get ready, it's coming. My day is approaching. And here comes Judas, and he gives the kiss of death, and they take Jesus, and they take him away, and he takes a sword, and he cuts off the servant's ear when he should have run it through Judas's heart, because Judas betrayed Jesus. Judas gave him away. Jesus is now in their custody, but they don't get it. Peter doesn't get it. It doesn't come to fruition yet. He doesn't understand yet what happened. And probably never did until they found out that Judas had killed himself after giving the money back. He's a great imposter. That's imposter number one. Imposter number two may be in this room tonight. As I've said, it may be a person next to you. It may be somebody that you're related to. It could be somebody that you've worked with in a Sunday school class or sat with in a deacon's meeting. It could be somebody that you've been married to. It could be you. And the only person, as we said before, that will ever truly know will be you and Jesus. And Jesus knows. Judas could not bear the weight of what he had done any longer. When he came to his senses and realized that he had been used of the devil, he had given himself to the use of the devil, he goes back and he tries to give the money back, doesn't he? Yeah. And what do they say to him? We can't take that. That's blood money. It wasn't blood money when they paid it out. No. Oh, no. But it was blood money when it came back. And Judas then understood exactly what he had done, and he went out and he hanged himself. And I'll tell you this, from Judas's house, we go up on top. There's a patio top where he would have sat in the cool of the evening looking over the old city of David. To the right is the valley of Hinnom. That's where Jesus said, he talked about hell and the flames of hell and the worm where it never died. That's the valley of Hinnom. He said, this is it. This is the garbage dump. He went across the valley of Hinnom and up on the other side, and there's a plateau there, and that is called the Potter's Field. That's what they named the place where Judas killed himself. It's still there today to mark what Judas had done. And you can see it from Caiaphas' house. It was not a very long walk. And folks, I'll tell you this, that you may play the game tonight, and you may get by in this year or maybe next, but there'll come a time in your life when you'll realize, I'm going to stand before Jesus, and I'm going to give account of myself. And in that time, you're going to do one of two things. You're either going to turn and run to Christ for salvation and turn to get right with God for the sin of your life, or you're going to kill off that opportunity by maybe even killing yourself. Is there an improbable imposter here tonight? I hope not. But there could be. And it could be you. My recommendation to you tonight is to say, Lord, I've been living a lie and I can't do it any longer. And in this invitation time, you'd come and say, Pastor, I've got to know Christ as my Savior. I can't stand it. That message tonight is tearing my heart apart. Or you'd say tonight, Lord, I've been playing the game of Christianity. I'm saved, but I've not really lived it. I live it here at church, but when I get home, it's a different story. And a wife might say, you might think my husband's a good man here, but when we get home, he's a different man. Or my wife's a different woman. Or my kids are different kids. And tonight, how about we say, God, I can't play the game anymore. I've been caught tonight. The Holy Spirit's revealed tonight. And I've got to get right tonight. And I've got to be a true blue Christian. How about tonight, we say no more imposter. The imposter surrenders, and a new man or a new woman begins to live for Christ. Heavenly Father, thank you for this night, and thank you for this wonderful conference that we've had. And I pray, Lord, that in these last 3 or 4 days, that some decisions have been made that will change lives forever. Father, I pray tonight that there's not one improbable imposter in this place. But Father, through this message tonight, for us that know Jesus Christ, may we become even more bold and more open in our Christianity, that no one would ever dare dream that we would be that person, and we would be telling the truth in the life that we live. Help us, I pray, to be that Christian that we ought to be and not play the game of Christianity. Our heads are bowed and our eyes are closed tonight. Let me ask you just a few quick questions, and then we're going to give our invitation tonight. How many times say, Pastor, I would like to tell you that I believe in my heart of hearts, without being proud, without boasting, just between you and me and God, I really believe in my heart of hearts that I am a true blue Christian. I love the Lord. I try to serve the Lord. I'm not perfect. I know that. I make mistakes. I sin like everyone else. But in my heart of hearts, I really believe like I'm a real deal Christian. How many of you say that tonight? Would you lift a hand high in the air tonight? God bless you. Amen. A lot of hands. God bless you. That's awesome. Thank you. You can put them down. We had probably 2/3 or more of the people that are here tonight raise their hands, but some of you did not. Thank you for your honesty. Thank you so much. You know, to unravel the life of an imposter begins with being honest with yourself. Are there some here tonight say, Pastor, I'm not living the Christian life the way I should, and I know it. And maybe tonight, Pastor, I've lived a Christian life, and I'm not even a Christian. And I realize that tonight. And I want to do something about that. I want that to change in my life. Are there some here tonight that I could pray for? Would you slip your hand up and say, Pastor, pray for me tonight. That's me. I want to be that real deal Christian, and I'm struggling with it, and I need help. Could I pray for you tonight? Would you slip your hand up all over this auditorium? Is there one? Is there one? Pray for me.